Now, if you've been watching the news, then you will be aware that a Cambridge team has just discovered the first likely signs of life on another planet. Now, in universal terms, then this planet isn't very far away. It's kind of within our neighborhood, even though it's 124 light years from the planet Earth. Sounds like a long way, but in cosmic terms, then that's relatively close. And the fact is that if there is life on this planet that's more or less in our neighborhood, then it's quite likely that the universe is absolutely filled with life. Trillions and trillions of worlds where there is potential biological life. Now, this is something that I've thought about all my life since I was quite young, because in my opinion, in my humble opinion, then to me it almost seems unfathomable that there shouldn't be life on other planets. I remember many years ago getting into, maybe you could say, an argument with a scientist. It was my belief that essentially it was inevitable that there were other planets, other planetary systems, other stars that are orbited by planetary bodies, and then it would be really quite crazy to think that we were the only one. But he was a very pure scientist, and because of this he was annoyed at my position. He saw it to be very unscientific and quite foolish. But all those years ago, I also had the same opinion that it was inevitable that there would be other forms of life in the universe, and also other forms of self-aware and intelligent life in the universe. So right now we don't have any conclusive evidence, but really it's just about our level of technology. The tool used to discover this signature of life on another planet is the James Webb Telescope. And because it's a new telescope, more powerful than the previous Hubble telescope, and of course it's going to be able to see with more detail and further into the distance. And so what they've detected are these biological signatures, hydrocarbons, that here on the planet Earth are produced by plankton, etc. Of course, it's not 100% certain that that's the only way we can produce these chemicals, but certainly here on the Earth, this is produced by living creatures who swim in the ocean. And this planet itself is an oceanic planet with a hydrogen atmosphere. But like I said before, I've been convinced pretty much all of my life that we are not alone in the universe, and that life must be quite common, really. Likewise, I believed that planetary systems must be quite common. Of course, we know now that they are very, very common. But to my mind, it's crazy to think that we would be the only instance of life, or the only instance of planetary systems in a universe that was so huge. To me, it sounds insane to think we would be the only ones. Because if you just look here on this planet, then what you find is that basically every conceivable place on the planet has life. And also, in the absolute harshest of conditions, there's life on the edges of volcanoes. There's life in the deep, frozen tundra, in the ice. Anywhere that there's the opportunity, then life takes hold. Another recent discovery that points to the existence of life elsewhere in the universe is from samples taken from asteroids. And recently, bringing these samples back to the planet Earth, what we've discovered is that there are complex hydrocarbons, the sort of things that are necessary for making molecular chains, for example, DNA, etc. These are actually quite abundant, even on the surface of these asteroids. What the Buddha taught is that there are infinite beings in the universe, and that every system, maybe galaxy, every universe, has trillions of life forms, or trillions of inhabited planets. 2,600 years ago, the Buddha taught that the human body was like a city. It's like a city in as much as it's completely inhabited by many, many different types of creatures. And of course, 2,600 years ago, then we had no way of knowing this fact. It's only fairly recently that we've discovered that the body is absolutely filled with different life forms. The Buddha also taught that although we can't see it, if you were to shoot an arrow through the air, then it would kill many life forms, because the air itself is absolutely filled with living creatures. And regarding larger life, then in general, the Buddha taught there were 6 classifications of beings. And humans were only one. I mean, we all have our own characteristics. And for example, in the Buddhist scheme of things, then animals are characterized by their ignorance, their very short memory, and their lack of ability to change their environment, work things out. And the Buddha also taught that there were advanced civilizations or advanced beings called devas who experienced unimaginable luxury. And I'm certain that this is the case. I mean, they've been writing about it in science fiction for decades, right? Centuries even. But for certain, then one day we will discover the signs of other intelligent life forms. It's only a matter of time. In a materialistic world, then I suppose one can be excused in thinking that perhaps we are the only living beings in the universe. Somehow I think this tendency is related to religious traditions. For example, many religious traditions teach that the earth was put here for humans' enjoyment. This special Garden of Eden created just for us. But in general, we have a very strong anthropocentric view where we see ourselves to be the center of the universe. I mean, if you look at the old solar models from the past, then basically we always saw ourselves to be at the center. We thought that we were at the center and the sun and the stars revolved around us. I think this has something to do with the belief that everything was put here intentionally for our enjoyment. But very quickly what we realized was that we weren't at the center of the solar system, and that in fact we and the other planets circled around the sun. As our science and technology advanced, we began to realize that we were only one of many solar systems. But then again, because of our human-centric view, anthropocentric view, then we saw our solar system to be at the center and everything else to be orbiting around us. But this just demonstrates our basic human ignorance, our basic problem in the mundane world, as it's taught by the Lord Buddha. The root of all our problems is fundamental ignorance. And that is the view that takes the self to be at the epicenter of all experience. This is our innate selfishness, our sense of inherent self-importance. And there's a reason why we experience so much suffering in the world. We want to put ourselves first. We see ourselves to be the most important. But the truth is, we are just one of many iterations of consciousness. And again, I'm losing track here. I was saying, if you have a materialistic view, then maybe it's excusable to think we're the only ones. Again, I think it's crazy, but maybe you can be excused if you think everything's just random, that consciousness is just an emergent property of physical action on brain tissue. But if you have a more realistic view of the world, a view that recognizes that there is nothing that we can conceive of that is somehow separate from the experience of awareness, then you will start to understand the importance of consciousness in the grand scheme of things. Although the lower levels of Buddhism, often called atomists, believe in an external and substantial world, that all of the higher schools, from the Chittamatra upwards, see that fundamentally consciousness is all there is. And so, in a world where we understand the importance of consciousness when it comes to experience of whatever it is that we perceive, in that world, then of course, it's only natural that we would believe that the universe is filled with living beings. And again, there's some level of distinction as regards to how awake those conscious beings are, or how much those conscious beings are slumbering in their own self-created ignorance. But on this scale, we have to admit, we're pretty low down in terms of awakening, because we're deluded by our self-created illusions. We are deluded by our sense of self and self-importance, because we are ignorant to the needs of others and take ourselves to be so important. And predicated on this belief of self-importance, then people like Elon Musk push the narrative that we are special and everything else has to be pushed aside for our own survival. But in the Buddhist cosmology, then our manifestation in this form, in this body, is of little importance. And what is of more importance and more significant is our mental habituation, our tendencies towards good and evil. Judge us not upon our physique or how clever we are at manipulating the world around us. Those who deserve veneration understand the power of nature, understand their place in the cosmos. And because of this, they give rise to humility. They are free of pride and think only of the benefit of others. In the Buddhist perspective, whether we achieve great wealth and technological progress is of little importance, especially if in that pursuit we fall sway under the power of evil deeds. And that's because causality, what we call karma, dictates the quality of our mundane experience. And so if you want to invest in a future, a better future, then don't think yourself too clever. Keep to a low station. Carefully guard your actions and never give in to negativity, because the returns of virtuous action are the experiences of well-being in the future. The technocrats want you to believe that everything is random. Whether we live or die depends on a random series of events. For example, a collision of an asteroid with the planet Earth, or the evolution of a new disease. The wise amongst us understand that positive actions lead to positive outcomes, and negative ones lead only to sorrow. And so they invest themselves in virtue. They put their energies into generating loving kindness and compassion for all beings, on whatever planet, in whatever corner of the galaxy, no matter how insignificant they might seem. Well, although we're living in difficult times, there is always hope for the future. Everything is impermanent. One day, even the sun in the sky will cease to shine. But if you believe what the Buddha taught, that what you will understand is that consciousness continues on. And whether we are born here on the planet Earth or in some distant galaxy depends solely on our actions in the here and now. So apply yourself to virtue. Give in generosity. Be tolerant of the ignorant and evil-minded. And in this way, not only will we transform this very world, but we will experience future happiness wherever we may be reborn. Well, that's about all I wanted to say this afternoon. Maybe it's easy to be positive now that spring has come, the days are lengthening, and the sun is shining in the sky. And although it can be a bit heavy, always focusing on the negative, unless we recognize that we can make a difference, make things better, then we will never apply ourselves to the path. Most dangerous of all narratives is a nihilistic one. And you should do everything you can to avoid falling into this trap. Nihilism is the greatest weapon of the evil-minded, because it justifies their narcissistic and selfish aims. First thing to do is be here now. Remain mindful. Do everything you can to avoid even the slightest negativity. Apply yourself to virtue and learn to thoroughly tame your mind. There is surely no other instruction than this.